All right, guys, we're back again with another COVID cabal. I am gonna be cutting to the chase pretty quick with this one because I actually almost canceled this COVID cabal. But I didn't want to do that. You can't do that too many times in a row. It's just, one of those things like I want to get it in. I want to have this set up. I want to do it. But I got like a really bad spider bite. So it's become like I like the skin has actually become infected. I'm not even like localized, like it's become like a bigger area. So I am feeling like not ideal for that. So for that and other reasons, there's not going to be any drink. I'm on antibiotics right now. I don't know what kind of spider it was. I think it was a wolf spider, and I think it just got infected or something. Maybe it was a brown recluse, but it's one of these things. Like I don't know why that would happen. Like it was just coming from planting flowers. So I'm not feeling in my prime for this COVID cabal, which is a shame because there's some really great topics to go into. It's Memorial Day. But anyway, guys, let's just get right into it. So we start off with the Memorial Day tweet from Trump himself. Happy Memorial Day to all, including the scum that spent the last 4 years trying to destroy our country through warped radical left minds who allowed 21 million people to illegally enter our country, many of them being criminals and mentally insane, through an open border that only an incompetent president would approve, and through judges who are on a mission to keep murderers, drug dealers, rapists, gang members, and release prisoners from all over the world in our country so they can rob, murder, and rape again, all protected by these USA hating judges who suffer from an ideology that is sick and very dangerous for our country. Hopefully, the United States Supreme Court and other good and compassionate judges throughout the land will save us from the decisions of the monsters who want our country to go to hell. But fear not, we have made great progress over the last 4 months, and America will soon be safe and great again. Happy Memorial Day, and God bless America. So that is a rye post right there from President Trump. I think that's him at perhaps his most aggressive that you normally see him talking about these things in his classic bombastic style. It's a little bit of extra bombast, but this is what I want to anchor this whole thing into the broader conversation, because I have talked about this is serious. This is what, like, I want you to stop and think for a second. What picture is being painted here? And guys, feel free to drop a comment in the chat. But what kind of picture is being painted here? Okay? This monologue is not somebody who is playing around. This is not a monologue from somebody who is saying, well, we're going to get along, we're working together. This is basically claims of treason. That's what it is. He's talking about them as if they are enemies to the United States. So here's the reason I say this. The reason I say it is because if you're President Trump and they tried to put you in prison and your family in prison for like 100 years, and they tried to kill you twice, bullet graze your ear, and you see exactly what they're doing. They don't care about the rule of law. They're trying to destroy the country. And you now, as president, understand. Now I forgot to add this to the slides. Now you have them saying that they are going to make sure to go after Trump. They take back the House or Congress in the 2026 midterms. So you stack all these things together and you think for a second, is there any possibility that Trump isn't going to do something? And I think that the answer is obviously that something is coming. Something is coming. And the reason that it hasn't happened yet is because it doesn't need to happen yet. I know a lot of people, a lot of J6ers, people want this to happen now. It doesn't need to happen yet. It does need to happen soon. It needs to happen within a year, but it doesn't need to happen yet. And the reason it doesn't need to happen yet is because you need to, if you are going to take the kind of actions that are necessary for Trump to move, and this is the mistake I made in 2020, because in 2020, I was like, 2021, I was like, if they take power, it's over for the country. They're going to do all this damage to the country. We're not going to get back. Well, I was wrong. We did survive it. By the skin of our teeth, we survived it. And by God's grace, we survived it. I wasn't wrong about what they do to us. I was just wrong about just how resilient the population was. And it turned out to be the best thing because it did wake up so many people. And we would have gone into a civil war if that had happened. If he had pulled these triggers back then. And actually, I'm not convinced that Trump, the more I understand about the administration, I'm not convinced that he had the proper people in position to be able to even deal with it. Putting aside where the public was at, his administration was completely compromised. I think he learned by the end that there were very few people around him that he could trust. So how are you supposed to go to war with the establishment, literally, when you have traitors around you? I think he would have, perhaps his decision was less a matter of him not having the will or even him not having the full foresight. Perhaps it was just simply that he didn't have the capability then. Maybe Trump was outflanked then. And maybe he was aware about that. That's not the case anymore. He's got his people in the key positions. Every couple of weeks, a few more bad eggs are discovered and purged. The administration is becoming more and more loyal, more and more cohesive as the months go on. We're 4 months in. He has no incentive to pull the trigger on something that is going to be so dramatic and consequential for the country until two things have happened. The first is that he knows the cases are rock solid. There's no wiggle room, which means that in the investigative branches, in the military, he needs to make sure he has all the right people in the right positions so that nothing's going to get sabotaged along the way. So you got to make sure you have all that you got all the leakers, all the moles out, smoked them out as many as you possibly can. You got to make sure you have the cases locked tight, no wiggle room, and you have to make sure the public understands exactly what is going on. And then there's the bonus, right? The bonus is that if possible, you let them be the ones who force you to take that action. And this is where it's going. So it's not enough for these judges to be saying, trying to run the executive branch. They are now trying to move into their own sort of police military forces. The judges are trying to now basically act as if they are the Department of Justice in the country. And as a January 6er, this doesn't surprise me at all because I saw the federal judiciary act like prosecutors. The judges acted like prosecutors. They don't act impartial. A lot of them were former prosecutors. So you see here, elements of the federal judiciary are considering moving from an effective judicial coup to an actual coup. In a stunning overturning of the Constitution, judges want the U.S. Marshals to report directly to them and arrest executive branch members. Amid rising tensions between the Trump administration and the judiciary, some federal judges are beginning to discuss the idea of managing their own armed security force. The notion came up in a series of closed-door meetings in early March, when a group of roughly 50 judges met in Washington for a semi-annual meeting of the Judicial Conference, a policy-making body for the federal judiciary. The Supreme Court has its own dedicated police force, but other federal judges are protected by the U.S. Marshal Service, which reports to Attorney General Pam Bondi. Security Committee members worried that Trump could order marshals to stand down in retaliation for an order they don't like. So you can already see where this is going. They and this is one of the things I want people to understand. There is no reason if Trump is in a much better moral position to do what needs to be done, which is mass arrests, military tribunals. Trump just said the other day, military tribunals. Who wants military tribunals? Guys, this stuff is coming. It's coming. And it's not coming because I'm a Q-tard. And it's not even coming because Trump is tweeting about it, but that should be enough for you guys to think it's plausible. It's coming because can you see any other option? Like, this is what I don't get when people say this is not going to happen, nothing's happening. There are only two routes. There you do this, or there's you die and your family dies and the country dies. Like, there's no middle option. The middle options have been exhausted. Right now, we are in a process of seeing who's going to come forward and talk. We're in a process of consolidating the position in order for this final move to be made. And you're starting to see more left-wing terrorism. There's some indications that the attack on X's infrastructure in Washington came from Antifa. You're going to start to see this stuff happen. There's been some series of actual assassination, left-wing terrorism. You're going to start to see a lot more of this happening around the country. It's an inevitable position. As Better Offer says right here, bottom line, Trump has to show strength. He has no choice. He has no choice. They are not giving him a choice. And that's the thing, is that when he crosses the Rubicon, in the end, the American public isn't simply not going to blame him for doing it. They are going to want him to do it. And not just people like me. We're talking about average Americans are going to see he has no other choice but to suspend habeas corpus and put the military on the streets and direct the mass arrest of basically the entire Democratic Party and numbers of others, of judges, of legislators. And they're going to have all the evidence there to dump it. Right now, the question is, are people making deals? I'm sure people are making deals. And I've been thinking about this with Comey. It absolutely wouldn't surprise me if Comey did that 86 Trump, right? He did the whole thing about threatening to assassinate Trump to get taken into the FBI so he could talk. He couldn't go there himself because he's got people watching him, and they'd know if Comey went into the FBI. So they'd say, well, Comey's cooperating, and then they'd have all sorts of switches and stuff. But in this case, Comey gets taken into question by the FBI. He's got plausible deniability. Because the thing is, Comey knew exactly what he was doing. So you only have two options. You have that he's literally completely unhinged, and he thinks that he'll get sympathy and support by preempting stuff. And I think there's some degree of plausibility to it, which is why it might have been a good strategy for him to do this so he could talk. But there's been a lot of indications that everything leads, like Comey. If you get Comey, everything else falls into place. We will see what that was about, or we won't. We will never know, maybe. But the point is, these people operate on mutual blackmail. When the house of cards really starts falling down, you're going to see people rat. And there's no question to me that Trump has his eye on the ball here. There is no reason, however, to rush it. Because what is going to come on the aftermath of this is so profound in terms of what Trump is going to be doing in the country and what's going to happen and what's going to follow across the entire Western world, that a lot of people aren't prepared for it. And this is what I'm going to move into for the next conversation, because this is also starting to happen too. And what I'm going to get into in a moment is going to be one of the more controversial things I've ever said on this show. And some people may not like me for it. I may lose some business for it. Some people may mischaracterize it, or they may misconstrue it. I'll get to that in a second. I'm just going to show this stuff from Better Offers. Consciousness is shifting. Energy only supports where we are going regardless. I mean, I think we are in a much more aggressive, militant time period too. I think that people are starting to be like, we're done with the bullshit. If you look astrologically, a couple days ago, the last planet left Pisces. I think Neptune left Pisces and moved to Aries. So we are 100%. There's no outer planets in Pisces anymore. We're done with that shit, which was when all the woke stuff started. Really kicked into gear in 2011. So we are absolutely done with that era, and we're going to be in a much more masculine, aggressive, do what needs to be done era. And I'll also say this, people forget that these people tried to fucking kill him. You think Trump is going to let that go? Zero chance. There's zero chance it's going to happen, guys. There's zero chance. We don't know the time, and we don't know how it's all going to happen, but we know it's going to happen. And there is time. You may not want to. You may not want to wait, but there's time. We have certainly until we certainly have a year. It's probably going to happen faster than that, but we certainly have a year. Okay? They are only going to make things worse. They're only going to make things worse. And, you know, Seth is actually here about to move this into the next topic of conversation. Don't know if you've touched on it, but lately it seems the race war narrative has been pushed hard lately. Another clue, they know the walls are closing in. This is true. This is true. There's no question that divide and conquer has been their moniker, and it always is their moniker. But, and this is why what I'm going to say is a controversial thing, but we really can't dance around a simple fact right now, which is that they are trying to genocide white people. They're trying to kill off white people. They're trying to kill off every single white country. You know, if you saw the vaccine stuff, which was proportionally pushed on white people in white countries, 33% reduced fertility among people who had it. From every single angle, this stuff is being pushed predominantly and focused in white countries. The migration issues are being focused in white countries. Okay. We could get into exactly why that is. I think that there's some degree of having an advanced population, an economically advanced population, maybe a consciously advanced population, that this was an enemy to the controllers. But the bottom line is that this is a real thing going on. And the migration issue is a huge deal. And this is some of the stuff I want to show next about the numbers of people. Lock Friend suggests that America is at 400 million residents instead of the official number of 340 million, would explain a lot of modern demographics. Anecdotal reports suggest this is true. There was, I think, an analysis of water use in the UK recently, which found the real population must be much higher than reported. Americans reporting abrupt demographic change in way out places all over the country. Definitely the same in Canada. Our governments deliberately let in huge numbers of illegals while also shrugging at visa overstays. The clear policy has been to immimax while just lying about, I guess that's immigrant max, while just lying about the numbers. They carefully didn't keep track of who even knows how many people are in our country. They all need to go back, but just as important, everyone responsible must pay for the treachery. So this is uncomfortable to talk about because there's a lot of good immigrants, a lot of good immigrants who aren't white, who came to these countries in good faith, contributed to the country. And they are not the enemy. They're not the problem. But at a certain scale, it becomes a problem because then you start to lose the character of the country altogether. And beyond this, the vast majority of the immigrants are not contributing in any meaningful way. They're not. I think the 100 million, I think if you count 100 million as illegals and children of illegals, I think that that's probably about right in the United States right now. And I'm just telling you guys what is coming. Okay? I'm just telling you what is coming. And it's not just going to be illegal immigrants going back. There's going to be denaturalization and deportation across Western countries. It's going to happen. The question, I think, at this point is just what the scale is, because the younger generations, like the boomer zeitgeist is really dying. It's really dying right now, the boomer zeitgeist. I mean, the fact that we're having this conversation right now, and in most people, there's going to be some people who are a little offended, but everybody knows it's true. Even minorities know it's true. I talk to them all the time. I got plenty of minority clients. They're great guys, like Indian guys, Asian guys, Black guys, Hispanic guys. They know what's going on. They know everybody knows what's going on. So my hope is that the backlash doesn't go so far that the immigrants who came to Western countries and really assimilated and contributed in good faith, that it's not going to be directed at them. But there's no question that it's going big time in this direction, and that there's going to be a lot of denaturalizations. You know, let's look at this right here. 70% of all Somalis in the UK are in social housing. Weird. It's the same in America. I mean, everyone talks about Minneapolis. Does anybody think for a second that because these people were given a piece of paper, that after all this shit hits the fan and we find out why they were put in the country to begin with, does anybody actually think, really, if you're being honest, if you see the times that we're in, and if you see that once you have a rising consciousness of people who say, we're being dispossessed and we're going to die, you're trying to kill us, do you think that they're going to care about the legalisms of the fact that a bunch of Somalians were brought into the country and they've contributed nothing? They've just taken from the country and they don't identify with the country. Do you think the fact that they have a piece of paper that says they're American is going to matter? It's not going to matter. You can just do things. And I'm telling you, things will happen, because once that guilt, and you can see it, once the guilt stops working, once you're like, I don't really give a fuck what you call me, it's not working anymore. Once that happens, it's over. Once that happens, it's a completely different game. It's a completely different game, and it's inevitably coming. You can see it in the online discourse, how much it's changed. I've watched it change in real time, not just before I went to prison to when I came out. I've watched it change in real time over the last 6 months. There is an aggressive zeitgeist shift. Cernovich talks about it a lot. Cernovich is a moderate. He's a centrist now. I'm pretty much where Cernovich is. There are guys who are a lot more radical than me who want every single person back. It doesn't matter. I am hoping that we can still honor some degree of understanding the fact that these are individual people. There's the group aspect of it, and there's the individual aspect. I'm hoping that it doesn't have to go that far, and it won't go that far. I'm hoping for that, because I know there's a lot of really good people. They never meant any harm, and they never did any harm to any of the countries that they came into, any of the Western countries. They only contributed. They totally assimilated. But it's getting ruined for them because the left took this out of control. It's getting ruined for them. I can tell you that they are going to use AI, and they're going to analyze immigrants, naturalized immigrants, and the children of naturalized immigrants. They're going to look and they're going to see, did these people contribute on a net basis to the country, or did they take? And at a minimum, if they took over the entire period, if they and their children took over the period that they came here, I'm telling you, it's going to get to the point where they're going to go back, because nobody, the line of argumentation for where we start to say, is this right or is this not right, is going to come when you get to the point of, well, maybe it's affected the culture a little bit, but they've still contributed economically. They've still been good. They've still been pro-social. If there's any element of not pro-social behavior, not net benefiting the economy from these people coming here, they're gone. I'm telling you, that's what's going to happen. People may not see it because they're still stuck in the paradigm that, we are bound by the rules of the Constitution that the fucking people never followed. It's an invasion. And I know it can be offensive to a lot of people to hear it, but here's the bottom line, guys. From a compassion standpoint, I went to Heathrow Airport a few days ago. There was like 5 English people, ethnic English people, who were working at that airport. Every other person there was from either India, Pakistan, or Africa. Every other person in the airport that was working there. Now, again, it's not about those people. I'm sure a lot of them were very lovely people, but that's not England. That isn't England. And what happens if England disappears? England disappears. There is no other place that they can go to. So you are talking about ethnic cleansing by a certain means. And I understand that for certain individuals, for certain immigrants, it hurts to hear that. But surely people can also have some degree of compassion that we won't have a European continent. It won't exist anymore. It won't. And the same is true to a large extent with America. America maybe has some more wiggle room because it is an immigrant country, but you get into similar stuff here, right? You get into similar issues with it. It's pissing off people. I'll probably lose some business for saying it, but I really think we're at the point where we just got to be honest about it. We got to call a spade a spade. This is what's happening, and there's going to be a reaction. My advice, if you are an immigrant in these countries, is to be as patriotic towards those countries as you possibly can, and to support the end of immigration and the deportation of a lot of these people. If you're in a European country, you should be flying that country's flag, and you should be telling everybody how grateful you are to be in that country. Because if you're doing that, you're probably in a good situation that it's not going to come after you. But if anything I'm saying offends you, then maybe we have a deeper conversation. Like if it offends you on a deep level to the point where you're not able to understand my perspective or the bigger perspective here, then we have a situation where maybe you're not a good fit because maybe you didn't assimilate, because you don't have any compassion, you don't have any love of the country you came to. You're using it. That's where we're at. We're at this point. We're getting to this point. And there's no question that as everything unravels for the cabal, and as Trump makes his move, that it's going to go this direction. And yeah, it isn't just, it isn't just, I mean, they're starting to do it in countries like Japan, right? They're starting to do it in countries like Japan. You know, IQ test to stay. There's a lot of different, I mean, look, if they're contributing, if they're hardworking and they're contributing, they haven't been taken from the welfare system. I'm open to that. I'm really open to it. I don't know where it's going to go, but we are talking about, we have been flooded, and we have been flooded as an act of war against the population of these countries. There is a Nigeria, there's an India, there's a Pakistan, there's a China even. There are countries that these people can go back to, but there isn't a country that we can go back to. There isn't. It doesn't exist anymore. It won't exist if this continues. And you can see by how they responded to the Afrikaners. We had like 54 people coming to the country, and how much they were angry about that. They showed what it was. They showed what it was. You know, and I think a lot of the countries around the world are going to accept those people back. I think that there's agreements being made between Trump and a lot of these Middle Eastern countries. If you look at the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, they have said, we don't know why you're letting these people into the country. Those people suck. Let us deal with them. These are other Muslim countries who have been saying this about the situation in Europe. They've been calling it out. You shouldn't let these people into your country. They're terrible people. We would put them in prison. I think that it's gonna happen. And the last thing I'll say on this topic, for those who think it's not possible or it's too late, first off, it's a matter of will. Okay, it's a matter of will. Have you internalized this sort of leftist guilt that if you do something to protect yourself and your progeny from survival, to survive, if you do something like that, then you're a terrible person and you deserve to die? If you've internalized a leftist mindset, then you're going to be helpless, because it's worse to be guilty of being mean than it is, you better die rather than be mean to some outgroup. But if you get over that, then it's not going to be complicated to deal with. I'm not going to say it's not going to be complicated. It will be complicated. I also think that some people are going to be paid to leave. I think that there's going to be a carrot and a stick to this process. And, these people are great at contributing. They've actually learned a lot in Western countries. They can go back to their countries of origin and they can contribute there and help to build those countries up, because colonialism is bad in both directions. I actually understand to some extent why European countries in particular really deserve, I don't want to say that they deserve it, but they took from these other countries, right? They took the resources, they used the labor of these other countries during the colonial period. There's sort of like a karmic payback going on. We want to neutralize the karma. We didn't get rid of colonialism. People need to have their own separate homes, their own separate nations, and we need to work together to build this world up so we can go to the stars. The reason that they are trying to push the migration in these Western countries is they're trying to stop the development of humankind, the development of consciousness. Consciousness requires individual groups to grow together. You can't do it when there's psychic violence in the air. I'm going to tell you something else. You know, being in Poland a lot, one of the things about being in Poland that is very, very different from being in the States or being in any other country in Western Europe is the lack of psychic violence. There is a peace in the air. And I'm not talking even just about like you don't feel worried when you're walking down the street. I'm talking about there is a lack of stress in the air. That doesn't exist in America. It doesn't exist in America anymore. It used to exist in America. I never, 10, 15 years ago, never noticed anything like this. It's because there is way too much going on. There's too much in-group, out-group dynamics going on. So for those who say it can't happen, look at Algeria. The French colonized Algeria in the 1830s for 130 years. 130 years, the French lived in Algeria. Algeria wasn't a colony to France. Algeria was part of France. It was part of metropolitan France, no different than Marseille. And in the 1960s, the Algerians said, you have to go back to the French. And they were right. They were right to have to go back because it was not French territory, really. The French were trying to colonize it. And they were trying to do it in a negative way to the population there. Now, you can argue the standard of living, it was more developed. I understand that stuff. But I am not. There are some people on the right. This is what I mean when I say I'm a centrist. There are some on the right who want to go back to like Afrikaners controlling South Africa or whatever. I don't let the Afrikaners have their own state in South Africa. There needs to be partition. Maybe they, you know, there's a good argument that they could be with the Khoisan and the Cape, and they could have two separate states. But you can't have. I'm not interested in trying to dominate other people or control other people. Let them develop as they are. Help them from outside as you can. Operate in good faith towards them, but with clear boundaries and barriers, so we can do our own things and grow our own ways. But the point of this is that what you had in Algeria, you had millions of Frenchmen, the Pied Noirs, who had lived there for 130 years. Their families had lived there for 130 years, and they all went back. So you're going to tell me that this is impossible, it can't happen? Of course it can happen. Of course it can happen. And I think the other countries around the world are going to work with the Western countries to do this by the end, because they have all been attacked in their own way by the same fucking group. The same group that's doing this to the populations in Western countries has also been in other ways economically attacking and assaulting these other countries. It's the French colonial franc keeping Africa down. It's the same stuff that was going on in Iran, you know, with all the sanctions and everything on Iran. I'm not saying I love Iran, right? But the point is, we need to all get our sovereignty back. We need to all get our sovereignty back. Sovereignty means coherent nations with strong borders. That's what it means. You can cut the tension with a knife in the States. The exact opposite in the Northwest, East and Mid-Atlantic states. Yeah, from Poland. Yep. So, all right, guys. So switching to the next topic here, we got one last thing I want to cover here, and this is the situation with Russia and Ukraine. Okay. So this is something from, hold on, let me get this here. So I'm going to see, maybe I'm going to start with this one here. Well, whatever, I'll start with this. Yesterday's video, widely circulated by Western media, showed Trump appearing angry at Putin. However, a follow-up question revealed something more telling. It strongly suggests that Trump, likely due to the filtering by figures like Keith Kellogg, isn't being given the full picture. When asked by a reporter to comment on Putin's helicopter being caught in a Ukrainian drone attack, Trump replied that he hadn't heard about it. Then he added, maybe that would be a reason for Russian strikes on Ukraine. Naturally, the reporter failed to mention that the more than 700 drones launched at Russian territory in the days leading up to Russia's retaliatory strikes. It's safe to assume Trump hasn't been told about that either. So I don't know whether Trump has been informed or not about some things. I will say this. There's no question he still has some people around him who are hawks when it comes to Russia. It's possible that some information isn't being trickled up as a result. It's possible. However, I will say this, because right now, and I'm going to show this Alex Jones tweet. I don't know how much has massed at least 50,000 troops on its border with Ukraine. Russia already has hundreds of thousands of troops on the border with Ukraine. So I don't know how relevant this is. Maybe he means 50,000 more. And maybe, what does he mean in the Kursk Oblast? Is it on the border with Ukraine in a different sector? Alex Jones is not being precise about this, and that's whatever. That's not surprising to me at all. No disrespect to Alex, but there's a lot of drama, not a lot of substance. There's one other thing I'm going to show here before we get into the analysis of all this, and this is from Joaquin Flores. Trump keeps preparing people for the reality that Russia might end up taking all of Ukraine. This isn't the first time he said it, just like it's not the first time he said Putin might be crazy or losing his mind. He said that openly during the 2024 campaign. Then, as always, the next cycle brings some version of Putin and I get along very well. So what's actually going on? Russia still needs time to wear down the AFU and finish the SMO. And if Putin really is crazy, then he's not someone you can negotiate with. What can the enemy within press say then? Very little, and that's the point. Trump's criticisms aren't connected with taking a harder line against Russia, but the opposite. It's all smoke blown while Trump follows through with his commitment to Putin after their 2-hour call to allow Russia and Ukraine to handle this with each other directly. Trump doesn't contradict that, but it doesn't change his core view either. This isn't his war, and the U.S. has no business trying to broker a deal between Kiev and Moscow. It doesn't matter what he says or who he criticizes or blames. In effect, he's just right-sized expectations. The loudest voices melting down over this are exactly who you'd expect, midwit obsessives with no instincts, staying online all day because they blah, 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 blah. The rest of it's just him criticizing people. But here's why that topic is interesting to me. Because I agree. I think regardless of what Trump is being told, whether he's getting all the details, and I think he probably is not getting all the details. Because I noticed that before, like he didn't seem to be aware of the casualty breakdown between Russia and Ukraine. But at the same time, and just for the record, Trump is very crafty, but I think a lot of people in our corner of the internet, we assume because we, check out podcasts and do research on this stuff, we're plugged in. We assume that Trump knows what's going on. I think genuinely Trump didn't even know about the vaccine. He didn't know what the vaccine was doing. I remember seeing this this clip. It was some country music star, I think, and who close to Trump, and he was in there in a meeting, and Trump asked, why everybody boos him whenever he talks about the vaccine, and that guy said, because everybody in that audience knows someone who's known someone who's had some issue from the vaccine, who's died or gotten injured. And Trump didn't know this. Trump was clueless about it. And we were all like, why does Trump keep doing this? It's dumb. And then eventually he finally stopped. We stopped doing it after that, apparently. The point is, like, that tells you that things that we take, like, of course Trump knows the vaccine's not good. Why is he still talking about it? Maybe aren't true. Maybe no one tells him. And, I've read the biography of Napoleon, and this was a major problem for Napoleon down the line in his campaigns. Because what happened down the line in his campaigns was that a lot of his officers, because his most loyal friends were gradually killed in the various campaigns, that he got to a certain point where people didn't want to tell him. People didn't feel close enough to him to tell him the truth about stuff. without having a negative reaction. So Napoleon, despite his genius, was actually not receiving comprehensive intelligence from what was going on in the battlefield because people didn't want to tell him when something bad happened. So Napoleon was making decisions without complete information. So it's certainly, there's no reason. Trump only has so much bandwidth. He can't do this stuff on his own. So it stands the reason the same thing is happening again on a lot of these topics. So I think that there's a good chance that Trump wasn't aware that there had been just an attack on Putin's life. And Ukraine knew exactly what they were doing because, I mean, I don't know what they think would happen if they killed Putin. Probably what they'd get is someone like Medvedev who would nuke the place. So I don't know, but if you view Ukraine properly through the lens that it's a pawn in a big geopolitical war to sort of gain control of the world economy and, you know, blah, 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 then they don't care what happens to Ukraine. They don't care if Russia retaliates because they want Russia to retaliate. And it's actually Putin's caution, you know, resistance to escalation. That is their biggest frustration. They want escalation in Ukraine. So I say all that stuff. What does that mean for the purposes of this Flores tweet, Joaquin Flores? And by the way, that's Tom Luongo posted that. Just want to give credit. What he's saying is basically that, because Trump said today, like, Putin's crazy. Why won't he stop doing it? And I understand from the Russian side, like, this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous to have this, oh, you know, you're the one who's arming Ukraine. Like, why would Russia stop fighting? Like, it doesn't make any sense to people in Russia or who are, let's say, Russian sympathetic, that like everything Putin's doing is not crazy. It's the definition of cold and rational. You know, you need to win this war on the ground because you have a partner who's not a partner. You have somebody who you cannot negotiate with in good faith, so you need to break them. And you have no downside to not breaking them because you can sustain the war effort. And you know you have an advantage in the casualties versus them. And the longer they are stubborn and don't come to the table, the more territory you end up taking. And if they take too long, you might get the entire territory. Probably will get the entire territory, at least all the territory you want. So when you view it from this perspective, what Joaquin Flores said is really brilliant. It's really brilliant. I think he's right about this because Putin and Trump have talked for a long time. So even if Trump's own advisors aren't giving him information, Putin's talked to him. And I don't think Trump cares if Russia takes Ukraine. But this is a way for him to say, wow, Putin's crazy. He just wants to take all of Ukraine. But he's telling people, he's seeing it in their mind that Putin's going to take all of Ukraine. And I actually think Putin will more or less take all of Ukraine because here's the issue. It's not even about the resources or anything. Like we talked on the last show that when you get west of Kiev, there's probably more liabilities than benefits in some sense, besides for just pure prestige. You know, Kiev has value as a historic economic city. You gain full control of the Dnieper River. You gain Odessa, you gain the Black Sea. You connect, like everything you need is from Odessa north and east. Like you go from Odessa north to Belarus and you head east and you get everything you really needed. And you could leave everything to the west as a rump state like Belarus that has like a same population, 9-10 million. But the issue is that even that 9 to 10 million person state is still going to be a Nazi state that hates Russia. It's still going to be a threat to Russia. It's going to agitate against the population in the rest of the territories. So even if Russia, in some senses, doesn't want the entire territory, it starts to get to a point where they need to occupy the entire territory because they need to denazify it. And at that point, why not keep most of it? So here's something interesting that I was just thinking about today. What if, and this is under the assumption that the EU is undergoing its own implosion, and there's reasons to think this may occur anyway, because the GDP of the EU is really not doing well, especially like Germany, which is the powerhouse. Their GDP is down to like 2005 levels of industrial output. Like I'm not sure if I have these figures all correct, but industrial output in Germany has declined for 5 years straight. They're just obsessed with deindustrializing and lowering the fossil fuels. The fossil fuel use in Germany, I think, is down to like 1950s level. So the GDP is collapsing. You have steel companies closing. You have, manufacturing companies moving out. EU is not going to make it. So what happens to countries that are actually in a good position, like Poland, like Hungary, maybe Romania? If the EU starts to lose its grip, Russia takes Ukraine, then can offer a deal. Russia can say, Poland, let me offer you a deal here. Let's sign a peace treaty with economic interests. We'll send you energy, and we'll give you Galicia back. We'll give you Lviv back in the area. Same goes for you, Hungary. We're gonna give you Transcarpathia. Romania, we'll give you Chernobyl, and maybe we'll even give you most of Moldova. Let's work out a deal together where we have economic agreements, we have peace agreements, and we give you this territory. And the only stipulation of it is that you have to deal with the Ukrainian elements, and you have to make sure to keep that territory denazified. Now, would Poland's current government support that? No, because it's an EU government. And same with Romania, which is why I think in part they've been so adamant about trying to make sure that these races go a certain way. But I could see this stuff changing. And think about this, how it would be from the side with Poland. Like, Russia's trying to give really great economic deals because Russia has the resources to help these countries boom. We're not only going to give you the resources, we're going to give you this territory that you really, really want. Only stipulation, don't let Polonize it. Don't let the territory go, develop an insurgency. But I think we've gotten to a point where Russia does not have the ability to allow an independent Ukrainian state, because that Ukrainian state will inevitably become hostile to it. The question is more, is it going to be a puppet state? Let me look at some of these comments here. Trump is distancing himself since he failed to negotiate a peace settlement. He still has to remain neutral, at least in appearance. Too many boomers still hate Russia for him to scorn the EU. This is totally correct. And this is part of the reason why the waiting game is relevant, because we get to have Zelensky show his true colors more and more and more. I can tell you, since the war began, like, Ukraine has been great at killing the pro-boomer, the Russian the boomer anti-Russian attitude. It's lost a lot of its luster. I'm not saying it's gone, but it's lost its vigor. People just can't really bring themselves to care anymore. And I've seen this with most of the anti-Russian boomers that I've met. They're mostly just like demoralized by it and are getting to the point of indifference. I don't think he could do it even differently if he had all the details. He has to posture himself this way as long as boomers think it's 1965. I agree with that. I agree with that completely. I think that's one of the positions that a lot of the pro-Russians, the Russians, when they get frustrated with the stuff that Trump says, oh, Trump's retarded. Trump's not retarded. But Trump has to position this stuff for a domestic audience. And it's a good position for him to say, this is crazy what Russia's doing. Russia's just taking the whole country. Well, I can't believe Russia wants to do that. They must be nuts. But, we're not going to get involved any further because we're not going to send our money over there because blah, 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 blah. That's a winning message for Trump. He can say Zelensky won't seek peace and Russia's crazy. They won't stop. But what are we supposed to do? It's a winning message. It's a winning message. Well, could we see a rise of an Eastern European Union? I'd love to see the world boom from Poland through the Urals as the EU wanes. Then USA exits NATO for swings to the east, I hope. I don't know that it's going to go like that. I mean, so Poland had a foreign policy in the 1920s called Między Morze, which means between the seas. And that was supposed to create a block from the Baltic states all the way down to Romania that was supposed to act as basically a Central Eastern European bloc that would be able to oppose both Germany to the west and Russia to the east. I know that what you're saying is more that they would join with Russia, and you know, I just think from a historical perspective, it's probably going to be difficult to do, even though a lot of the younger generation doesn't care as much. There's a party in Poland called Konfederacja, which is a right wing party in Poland, which is right wing without the typical anti-Russian position, and it's very popular among the youth. So I do think that there's room for a changing of awareness, but Poland and Russia have always been big rivals. And while I think let's do the baby steps, right? With strong economic ties. And it's not, I'm just throwing this out there. Like, the Poles were involved, and they were neocon Poles, right? But they were involved, like Sikorsky, etc. But they were involved with the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline. So I mean, there's impediments for Russia and Poland to work together well, but changing of the guard, changing of the world order. There's a lot of room for reasonable people to prevail. And I'll just say, on a broader basis, America, if you put America and Canada together, you have like a superpower with the resources and the manpower to fuel things to the take us to the stars. Europe has the manpower and human capital to do that, but they need Russia's resources. I am not saying that America will give up sovereignty or suzerainty over Europe, but I will say that if Europe ever hopes to achieve great things again, Europe is going to have to become on good terms with Russia. It's going to have to deal with the migration issue, and then it's going to have to be on good terms with Russia and have strong economic agreements, because Russia has the resources to, like, if you put Russia and Europe together, you have now, first off, very, very shared cultural background, and you have a plan to get to the stars. You have the resources, you have the infrastructure to do it. Russia will sell its resources to China, but the reason Putin has always been very hard pressed to move east is because I think, he knows it makes more sense. He knows it makes more sense, and it's a healthier relationship. At least it could be, in theory, a healthier relationship. We'll see what happens, but I mean, if you look at the astrology for Russia, Russia's got great signs ahead for it. So I think you get Ukraine in, or at least the parts of Ukraine that they want, if they can't pawn off the other pieces. And look, don't think for a second, like, I think it's very unlikely that if Russia genuinely offers, if you have a changing of the guard in Eastern Europe and Russia genuinely offers Lviv back to Poland, Poland's going to, I mean, would they really not take it? Not during the EU situation right now, but I think they take it otherwise. So, especially if they know it's going to go to Russia otherwise. It's not like independent Ukraine. It's either you take it or it's ours. What's it going to be? I think they take it. And it takes a big headache off of Russia. And just psychologically speaking, it reduces the targeted resentment of Ukrainians maybe towards Russia. Maybe. Because now they've been split up between four countries. I know that sounds pretty harsh. But I look at it historically. And I've never been really persuaded about the Ukrainian identity. Sorry, just never been really persuaded by it. People make the arguments. I've seen Wikipedia change over the years as more and more revisionism gets thrown in there, but it's revisionism, just what it is. So I think that you get Ukraine, Belarus back to Russia, and maybe Kazakhstan, maybe northern Kazakhstan. Maybe not. But Belarus is certainly being primed for Lukashenko to retire and join Russia. I think that Russia and America, I think that everything's going to be good, but we're in for a lot of turmoil, and you just got to have a strong will, and you got to have a will to survive. You got to have a will to, you know, we need to get back on track to move for the stars. That's why the birth rates are low. That's why there's this malaise, because we haven't been advancing. Western civilization kept advancing and advancing, and now it's become like a daycare for the rest of the world. We need to let the rest of the world grow, not concern ourselves with them. Help them, nudge them along, that they can join us on this quest. But we got our own paths. And we can't get tied up in it. And that's my perspective, guys. So I hope you enjoyed this controversial COVID cabal. We got some good stuff maybe coming down the pipeline. Maybe we're going to be finding out about the Whitmer Fednapping plot. Maybe. I do think that big stuff is coming, guys. So I'll see you in the next show. Take care.